Welcome back to another episode of CRM Radio Live, the voice of customer relationship management, brought to you by the good folks at Goldmine CRM, with the man who's seen it all. He's been a voice for a long time and continues to be a leading authority in the field, Mr. Paul Petersen. Hey, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
You know, I know that everybody is supposed to feel sympathetic because you're back in the Midwest here, and it's been a horrible, difficult winter here. And I know your next guest is up in Seattle, and they had some sudden snow, and everybody was shocked. But it's bad down here in Southern California, I got to tell you. I want a little sympathy here. I want to join the pity party here because it's been raining now on and off for 3 weeks. And that's just like, we're like suicidal when that happens here.
Because you're used to being out so much, and here at least it's cold, but everything's in place. My car's stuck. I have a car that I could not move. Ice froze, and the tires, the car barely has traction on dry pavement. But, well, it's good. I'm glad you said that I was a guest because I heard that great offer from Heinz Marketing. And, of course, today, Matt Heinz, welcome. Also a big podcaster. But I wanted to close up a little piece of business from last week when we were talking about with Amy Guerrero of Kindly from Artificial Intelligence. And I made a reference, and Matt, I don't know if you're a science fiction fan or not, but I made a reference to the 2001 Space Odyssey movie and the computer in that movie.
HAL.
Named HAL. Do you know why it was named HAL?
Ooh, I used to. It's an acronym for something, and I don't remember. I remember the movie vividly, but I don't remember why. I remember the creepy voice and everything, but I don't remember. It was like a HAL 2000 or something, I think it was. Yeah.
Dave, what are you doing with the pod door? Matt, do you remember that movie?
I remember the movie. I don't remember. I know that HAL is an acronym, but I thought that HAL actually had some also sort of interesting back.
Sort of, and it kind of a nice lead into where we're going to go, and that is that HAL is one letter before IBM.
Oh.
And think about when that movie came out in the late 60s.
H is before I, and B is A is before B, and right.
Yeah, I was just looking at something yesterday about the transition of brands over time. And at one time, IBM and Coca-Cola and IBM were the two leading brands in America, so back in the 60s, and over time that has shifted. Think about the context of that and what HAL and IBM meant, and this computer was lip reading, and I remember the chill that ran down my spine, back then. But what it also prompted was that I got my entree into technology, and my first job was in a raised floor, closed computer room running an IBM 370 156 computer. So I was feeding card decks and hanging tapes and papers. So IBM, and my parents worked for IBM. I was an assembler programmer for IBM. So I was going to start out with that horrible segue to Matt, you're CEO of Heinz Marketing, 20 years of development. But how did you get your start in sales or technology, and how did you evolve to to set up Heinz Marketing?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure. For me, this has really just been a big, giant mistake. I studied journalism and political science at school and intended to be a reporter. I wanted to go be Woodward and Bernstein and right the wrongs of the world. And a few different turns later, I ended up running marketing for a couple local startups, and 10.5 years ago, starting my own deal. It's been very fortuitous because I really, really enjoy what we do. We help B2B companies kind of build sales pipeline and help eliminate some of the lumpiness that often exists in sort of month-to-month, quarter-to-quarter sales pipeline development. So certainly not something that I grew up thinking I was going to do, but I love it. I really enjoy it.
I started as a programmer while I was going through school and studying to be a lawyer. And by the time I got out of law school, I was so enmeshed. I worked for Arthur Young at the time. I was so enmeshed in technology that practicing law never entered it. Yeah, so sometimes... What did John Lennon say? So there's a Beatles reference. Life is what happens when you're making other plans. But
yeah, exactly.
You talk about, and by the way, I love your website. It's a nice crisp view. You've got the little tiles that break out all the different services that your company provides in a slightly interactive way. But you mentioned pipeline, and I think you called yourself the firm a math marketer. So why is pipeline focus today?
Historically, I mean, we come from the marketing side. Historically, I think a lot of marketers have focused on just more of the marketing of more, right? More clicks, more traffic, more likes, more activity, and more activity-based programs don't necessarily generate revenue results. When you go from what, in many cases is a glorified arts and crafts department to more of a revenue-responsible marketing approach, to think about, look, we still got to drive awareness, we still need to get people to our website, but the goal is not to generate leads even. The goal is to generate sales pipeline and close deals. None of it really matters unless you hit metrics that you can buy a beer with. So I think for marketers to have that sales and revenue objective in mind and to work back from that on what are the right activities, what are the right processes and systems that can deliver that pipeline and deliver those revenue results more consistently, it's a far better approach. And I'm heartened to see more and more marketing organizations take that approach and really partner with sales to deliver that kind of value.
Even with my own organization, we struggle because there are some marketing metrics. One, you want a lot of site visitors. That's a good struggle. The rubber hits the road when you say, okay, you get marketing qualified leads, get to give them the sales qualified leads. So it's that point, and it's a struggle in getting marketers to understand and getting salespeople to realize that, hey, every lead you get is not going to be ready to, I'd like pricing for 6, So what have you found to be good techniques for bridging the so-called gap between marketing and sales?
I think first is to kind of put the cheese in a better place. I think if sales is measured based on closed deals and marketing is measured based on hitting a retweet goal, that isn't going to drive alignment. So I think there has to be some revenue objectives from marketing to drive alignment. I think that both teams have to agree on what the key metrics are, right? I mean, it's one thing to say, well, we agree on this sales metric, but does both sales and marketing agree on how much pipeline is required to hit that number at the end of the month, end of the quarter? Does sales and marketing agree on what conversion rate you're expecting on qualified pipeline into closed deals? And what does it mean to be a qualified opportunity? I mean, the rubber meets the road very quickly. Things break down even if you've got strategic alignment between sales and marketing. Yes, we're going to be focused on revenue. Yes, we're going to both focus on closing deals. Well, what does that look like on Tuesday? Which leads go to sales and why? And how many leads does sales need to get to a qualified pipeline to increase confidence you can hit your number? So I think that there is that strategic alignment that gets marketing to literally say, we are the same goal as sales. But then to break that down to understand what are the components on a daily, weekly basis that we can control and manage that can contribute to that, to increase our confidence and scalability in terms of hitting those numbers, not just this month and this quarter, but to make sure you can hit them in quarters and months in the future.
One of the notes that on your site, you cited CSO Insights, right? So Barry Traylor and Jim Dickey's survey that has gone on for a number of years, right? And you said something about only 3% of prospects in a pipeline are active. So what are the other 97%? Why are they there, and what are they doing, and how did they get there?
Well, I think it was CSO or Gartner. It was one of the two. Sort of said that 3 or 4% of any given market is actively buying. That same report indicated that 46% of any given market is what they call poised. And poised is defined by a company that has a need but is not actively pursuing it. Either they have not prioritized it, they don't realize they have that problem. They may have not quantified the opportunity cost of solving or not solving that problem. And then there's a whole other 50% that just either they're not qualified or not interested, right? And I think it's interesting and important to realize that if those numbers are correct, the whole half of your market, you're chasing your tail trying to get them to even show interest in your solution, let alone understand the problem. So I think the big opportunity for sales and marketing organizations, obviously, you have to execute well against the 3 or 4%, but if you've got someone actively buying, that's a little, I'm not going to call it a layup. You've got someone that already understands the problem in pursuing it. What are you doing with that 46% to challenge their status quo? What are you doing to introduce, sort of in the challenger, parlance, what are you doing to introduce insight, commercial insights, and even a reframe of a current problem that they do or don't know that they have that helps them get committed to change for themselves, committed to change on their own behalf. And so I think it's that 46% and understanding how you move them from complacent, passive to active. For most of us, that is where our big focus is in trying to create new pipelines.
Yeah, so the 3% that are active, and today a VP of sales, he said, my team is very, very good at responding to anybody who calls in and asks for information. and so forth. He said, but that's not enough. I need to get them focused. And so what we're talking about here are, and in some cases, these poised, I like that word. In my parlance here at Goldmine, we call them future prospects. People who could buy your product or service but aren't ready yet. So sort of a similar bit. And salespeople aren't good at nurturing that sort of thing, right? So that's a great kind of throw it back to marketing and let them nurture it, right? Do you find nurturing to be a good strategy for trying to convert those poised leads?
Yeah, of course, but it's not just marketing's job to do that. I think that if sales has had a conversation and the prospect is qualified but not ready to buy, which happens quite frequently, there's surely an opportunity for marketing to stay in touch with value of that prospect. But there's also an opportunity for the salesperson to maintain a level of communication and to provide insights as well. I mean, I don't care how good your sales process is, you're not really going to control when an enterprise prospect is ready to buy. There are too many variables, there are too many people in play. So all you can do is provide insight to challenge status quo, point out the problem and to point out the urgency and the opportunity cost of solving that problem. And do that with enough prospects that you can get a high enough percent of those and a high enough volume of those to get into that active selling opportunity. Now, if you are the organization, this is where it really gets interesting, because if you're the organization that moves that prospect from poised to actively buying, if you provided the insight and the ideas and the impetus to become an active buyer, you become the incumbent, right? You get to write the RFP if it has to get to that point. It may not even get to an RFP because that prospect now has confidence that you understand their business and their problems well enough that you likely have a solution that can solve for that. It puts you in the catbird seat versus if you've got someone that just comes to you and says, we're actively buying, you haven't had a chance to build rapport. You haven't had a chance to build differentiation. You may look and sound just like everybody else in your market, and you may not have time to differentiate. So your conversion rate on those actively buying prospects may actually be lower than you want and than you expect. So building value and taking the time and having the patience and discipline to build interest from those poised prospects may be the most efficient way to build predictable pipe.
And as we wrap up this segment, we had a couple of guests that spoke that, when we talk about the role of salespeople in today's world, that's a great role for a salesperson, isn't it? To say, if the customer, marketing can get the brand out there again, but if the customer remembers the conversation they had with you, because you offered some value or you were just memorable. I had somebody from 2 years ago, I'd sent them an email. They dropped off the map and came back and had my email, remembered me, and said they liked something I said, and they reached out 2 years later. So we're going to take a break right here, and then we're going to come back and maybe talk a little bit more about what we can do on pipeline management, how technology can help. Back in a moment.
We know you rely on your CRM system, and it's usually a love-hate relationship. Most CRM systems, well, let's face it, they're expensive. They're hard to understand. People don't use them properly. And you're probably paying for features that you don't even want. If that's your case, then maybe it's time to simplify. It's time to get more from your CRM. Why don't you go back to the original? Trust Goldmine. We helped pioneer the industry, after all. Goldmine CRM is, well, it's simple, it's affordable, and it's proven. If all those sound appealing to you, if you're just tired of the CRM headaches that you're getting from trying to implement something that's just too complicated, too expensive, and too much for you to figure out, then why not go back to the original? Visit Goldmine today, goldmine.com. All right, back to Paul and his guest as we listen to these two titans talk it out.
So Matt, a well-known speaker, often speaker, so as you get out into the audiences today, compared to maybe a few years ago, have you seen any shift in what they're concerned, what the people in the audience are concerned about? I know it's kind of a broad question, but usually there are a few people who always come up and buttonhole you a little bit and talk to you, or if you get feedback from the sessions or based on questions. Have you noticed any change over the last 5 years, let's say, between what they were asking for then and what they're concerned about today?
I do. I find there are more marketing leaders that are thinking about sales pipeline contribution than before. I think previously it was all about lead generation. Today, instead of just focusing on marketing qualified leads, we find more marketing teams focused on sales qualified leads and opportunity creation and marketing influence on closed deals. So we'll see some marketing teams, part of their goal is 8% of closed deals that have been contributed or influenced directly by marketing in a measured way. In complex deals, that can be a really hard thing to do, right? It's a lot easier just to measure whether someone clicked on a link or whether someone filled out a form or if they stopped by the trade show or download the white paper, but that doesn't necessarily indicate the true impact and influence on closed deals. And so I do see more organizations that out, which even if they haven't cracked the entire nut, it certainly helps impact more productive decision-making and focus. I'm also seeing marketing and sales in many organizations really operationally work more closely together. I think, historically, maybe 5-7 years ago, we were still dividing the funnel horizontally, where marketing owned the top of the funnel, sales owned the bottom. And in more leading organizations that we see that are more consistently hitting their number today, I see that funnel being split vertically, where sales and marketing are really thinking about their roles in parallel and in an integrated way across every stage of the pipeline. So marketing may have the lead at the beginning of the pipeline, sales may have the lead at the end, but sales still has a role to play at the beginning. Marketing can still provide great content tools and process at the end of the process to increase conversion. So I think, being more revenue responsible for marketing and driving more operational alignment at every stage of the funnel between sales and marketing are two of the biggest positive shifts we're seeing in the market today.
Do you have any tips for managing sales teams in this day and age? I still, for my sales team, what we came up with one key qualifying question. I said, at the end of any conversation you have, and I'm one of these, I don't believe in a script. I believe the conversation should start out somehow organically, but you want to get around to some factor. Do you have a CRM solution or not? That's what we happen to market, because at the end of the day, that's what I want to know. Right. I said, so to me, that's the only everything else is interesting, but that's one. And then you have to find out why they don't, how they have avoided that. But is there anything else salespeople can do to manage their pipeline better?
Well, first of all, I don't see how you can be successful in delivering predictable, scalable pipeline without CRM. And I think we can all agree that technology is not your strategy. There has to be a strategy that tells you how to implement technology. I fundamentally believe a good CRM system is table stakes for companies to make the leap from random acts of sales and marketing and lumpiness to driving more consistent, predictable pipelines. There are a lot of things we're seeing sales teams lean into. The one thing I think I've been noticing more often this year and sort of spending more time talking about is the difference between give and ask. If you look at a lot of salespeople's approaches, there's a lot of sentences that start with I and we. You look at the overall sort of request in an email or a message from a salesperson, and it's about what they want, what the sales team wants, right? And there isn't enough focus put on what the prospect wants. And if your interests are aligned anyway, if your interests are aligned such that you may eventually be able to work together, you should be able to prioritize the prospect's needs first. And so in that first interaction, when you're trying to build some trust and credibility and engagement with that prospect, put the majority of the focus on a give. That is what's going to stand out and get the prospect's attention. That's what's going to get them to respond. You can ask later, and in many cases, the give can be related to the ask if it's tied to something that does that challenging of the status quo we talked about earlier. So I think just as a tactic for sales reps as well as an organizational approach for sales organizations to really shift those asks into more gives, we're seeing companies have some dramatic improvements, engagement rate, and sort of lead conversion rates at the top of the pipeline as a result.
Who best to train those salespeople on how to do that? Does marketing have a role in that?
Certainly. I encourage marketing organizations to raise their hand and volunteer to provide more sales enablement effort, provide more sales training. I mean, an awful lot of sales training really is focused on the company and the sales process and not enough focused on the customer. Who are we selling into? What do they care about? Why should they care about us? What are their issues? So I think marketing can provide that kind of guidance for sure, but I think in any organization, you really have to pay attention to your culture, right? Who are the players? People talk about, should marketing own the inside sales team or the lead qualifiers? Well, it depends on the culture, right? In some cases, it may make better sense for marketing to own it. In other cases, it may make better sense to sales to own it. So as you make some of these shifts, or these strategic and operational shifts, I think it's important to pay attention to your culture, your politics, what you've done in the past, and move forward in a way that's really going to have an impact and improve the culture morale concurrently.
You talked about CRM being a great tool, and one of the tools should be, right, the sales forecast. And I was going to ask you the question, in a modest business, if you're running a manufacturing business, you need to know forecasts down the road, right, so you can start to plan materials. But in, let's say, a smaller privately owned business, does a forecast have importance?
It sure does, and I think I don't see how you can run sort of a predictable pipeline program without a forecast. But that forecast had better be consistent. You have to have really solid understanding of what a qualified prospect looks like, what a qualified opportunity looks like, so that everyone is playing from the same playbook, and so that you can expect a consistent conversion rate. Right? I mean, I've seen some organizations where the sales reps are throwing as many opportunities in as they can just to look busy. I see the same organizations have sales reps that only put opportunities into the pipeline when they're sure they're going to close, so that their conversion rates look good, right? And so both of those efforts, and most sales reps are somewhere in the middle, but both of those efforts really screw up your ability to predict what your closed deals are going to look like, So I think, yes, forecasts are crazy important, but they're built on solid understandings and definitions of what good prospects and good opportunities look like.
I referred to it as the sales agenda. It's a great way for a sales manager or the owner of the business to review with the salespeople. What are you working on? What are they telling you? And use it as a prompt to learn about the accounts and so forth. So time flew by fast, and Matt, HeinzMarketing.com, great place to reach you, learn about your broadcast show. I'm going to ask you, you got Amazon.com as a client. We don't typically think of them as a sales organization, but we may be out of time on that one. But what was the area where you were helping them out?
Yeah, there's quite a few B2B components in Amazon. I mean, you think about how many merchants, small businesses are selling their wares on Amazon, and sort of the front end and back end of sort of helping and engaging with and recruiting more companies to sell on Amazon. I mean, that's a big part of what we worked on with them in the past.
Well, Matt, thanks for joining us today. And as I say, you can hear him on the radio show as well, and from his website, HeinzMarketing.com. Rehabbed a 103-year-old farmhouse. I saw that in your bio. You're sort of a modern Mr. Blandings, built his dream house. But any lesson learned on that?
I think the same lesson there is often doing work. My family's from the Midwest, and so they taught me to be humble. Put your hard hat on, keep your head down, do the work, right, and serve people. And so we try to do that in the business, try to do that with our clients, and working on the house, we try to do that as well. Just it's been a lot of fun. It's very gratifying. I talk and type for a living for the most part, so being able to sort of get to work on my calluses on the weekend at home gives me a lot of satisfaction.
Physical activity, whether it's golf or hammering something or even mowing the lawn, just does make you feel a little bit better about who you are. So, well, with that, Matt, thanks so much for joining us today. Appreciate it. And we just cracked the surface, in a few minutes here of some of the issues. But pipeline management, important for businesses of every size, sales and marketing to help on that pipeline management. And with that, Paul, surf's up.
You've been listening to another episode of CRM Radio Live, right here on the Funnel Live radio channel for at-work listeners like you.